Hello, it's Mike Levin, SEO, out walking Doofenshmirtz here. It's Tuesday morning, October 28th, I guess around 7:30 a.m. And I spent a fair amount of time yesterday looking at how to implement OAuth2 and ran into some hurdles. And I don't know whether I'm going to be able to finish them and get it implemented this week before Disney or not, but I'm certainly better off knowing about these hurdles and being able to investigate the best solution in the meanwhile. So the problem is that OAuth2 is an alternative to using a username and password, both on the user's part. They don't have to enter a username and password, but also on the application's part. It doesn't have to store the user's credentials anywhere, not even in memory, and certainly not on the hard drive, the way I'm currently doing with Pipulate in order to get access to Google spreadsheets. So how do you get rid of username and passwords? The answer is OAuth2 and variations of it, where login providers like Google and Facebook let you use their login, because you're usually already logged in, but even if you're not, it would work. It would prompt you to log into them in order to prove that you are who you say you are, so that they can give you back a temporary token that you can carry with you that gives you access to their services as if it were a username and password. You're authenticated and you're let's see, there's two levels. It's always two things. There's you are who you say you are, and then you're granted the access that you need. So OAuth2 is something that developers implement so that you can say login with Facebook, login with Google. I'll be using login with Google, obviously, because it's a Google service. But now the gotcha, the trick is that they have a security precaution to prove that your application is the application it says it is, so that developers just can't go spoofing each other's apps to get these authentication tokens. It's less secure in the sense that apps can spoof each other than if an app can prove it is what it says it is. And they do that using something called a secret. I believe it's called an application secret, but at any rate, it's something that's given to you by Google or Facebook so that you can embed into your application at the time the user asks for an OAuth2 login or an authentication token. The problem with that is it's a secret. And my project is going on GitHub. And most people's solution to this is to embed the secret in a file that's outside the repository, exactly like I'm doing with a pickled username and password. The problem with that is once people download this GitHub project, if I rely on them to get their own application secret from Google and to enter it in, it's even worse than asking the user to put their username and password in, because that's a convoluted process. It's just extra steps that will keep this thing from ever becoming really popular. So what's my solution? Well, it turns out that you can have applications run in this slightly less secure, secretless way, where apps are capable of spoofing each other, but that is a much lower security risk than giving your secret out in the application, to exposing it to the world. And OAuth2, I believe, is actually allowed to work without that application secret. It's just that none of the client libraries that are distributed, particularly under Python, which I'm using, allow that. They have internal restrictions that require the providing of that secret. Now, I could go ahead and modify the Python client libraries, but then I need to make that modification every time I update the client libraries, and it just doesn't seem the way to go. But it turns out that because web apps, pure web apps, ones that run in JavaScript on the browser, are so popular these days, the technique of not using an application secret is more common, because JavaScript is generally just visible by, you know, visiting the URL that the JavaScript's being loaded from. And no one wants to put the application secret in there. So it should be possible, and I found at least one piece of sample code yesterday that seems to be implemented that way, but I didn't get to testing it myself. And the funny thing there is, because it's written for pure JavaScript applications, and my thing really is a Python web server application, I will be doing session hijacking. No other way to really put it. You use the JavaScript technique for doing an OAuth2 login. You acquire your token. It's only in JavaScript on the web browser, but then you pull it down to the server and hold it for the duration, usually of the session. I might try and keep it longer and renew it, but then I need to work in something called offline mode, where you can keep renewing these tokens and keep them from expiring. And that seems to not be enabled by Google's OAuth login system if you're using the JavaScript method. It gets a little complicated. OAuth2 is actually a fairly complicated thing. It makes a good amount of sense when you think about it, and you can in fact avoid using usernames and passwords entirely from the user's perspective, except to log into Google or Facebook or the initial provider. But the idea is that the application, the developer, wants to also avoid using anything that is secret, so that nothing ends up in the program code and the GitHub repository that shouldn't be let out. And that should be possible under OAuth2, with the price of it being a spoofable applications. Other applications might be able to pretend that they are that application, but it's really that way anyway, because if these OAuth2 login servers allow a token to be given without an application secret at all, that security hole already exists. I'm not introducing it by not using the application secret in my code. So there it is. That's my discoveries from yesterday. It was a lot for me to absorb. Probably spent a little more time on it than I should have, but I felt it was kind of necessary, because this is the last remaining hurdle to make this thing truly ready for prime time, downloadable from GitHub, installable on your own hardware, whatever it is, and usable at least to do some of the basic functionality every day that SEOs and social media people do. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.